Rank by rank again we stand, from the four winds gathered hither, loud the hallowed walls demand, whence we come and how and whither, from their stillness breaking clear, echoes wake to warn or cheer, higher truth from saint and seer, call to us assembled here. Ours the year's memorial store, honored days and names we reckon, days of comrades gone before, lives that speak and deeds that beckon, from the dreaming of the night to the labors of the day, shines their everlasting light, guiding us upon our way. Though the path be hard and long, still we strive in expectation. Join we now their ageless song, one with them in aspiration, one in name, in honor, one. Guard we well the crown they won, what they dreamed to be ours to do. Hope their hopes and seal them true.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder on this Sunday afternoon, April 3rd, to the installation service for our minister, Reverend David Schwartz. I am Jim Rao, the president of the congregation, and I'm very pleased to welcome you into this house of memory and hope. All of you are welcome, and all of you are sacred. Whatever your past was like, and whatever this present moment is like for you, we invite you to journey into the future together. Welcome to everyone joining us via the magic of the internet. We are delighted that you're here. This congregation is all of us, together in person and online. If you're a new online visitor, you'll find a link to our visitor form in the video description. As we gather, I want to extend a special gratitude to our search committee. A search committee is one of the most important and most labor-intensive volunteer roles in the congregation. Through the last church year, in the midst of a pandemic, when they couldn't even be in this building, your committee worked tirelessly and faithfully. Billy Abbott, Nicole Ball, Mary Clough, Will Kropp, Kathy Edwards, Pam Leland, Laura McGuire, will you rise and be recognized? Thank you. In gratitude for the journey behind us, in excitement and curiosity for the trail which leads on ahead of us, I invite Reverend Dana to light the chalice.
When I started working at UUCB, it was the summer of 2018. Remember back then? Amy, our office administrator, had just started her job 1 month before me, and Kelly had been here for 3 years, and Abby was our director of congregational life, and I'm not sure how many years Abby had been here. So she was working part-time. So the stage was set for growth and expansion for this flourishing congregation. Our first year together turned into our only year together. With the news from Kelly that she had decided it was time for her to leave. And Abby left a few months later. Nothing was wrong. We have to remember this. There was no big church drama happening. It was just time in Kelly's life to move on. This was hard news, and it sent our whole congregation into shock and grief. Whether we liked it or not, we were now on a long and challenging odyssey. A 2-year interim is rarely easy, but our first interim minister was ill and left at the end of his first year, which was also a few months into this thing called a pandemic. We were fortunate, very fortunate, to find Reverend Jeremy Nickel to work with us part-time for a year during the second year while our search was underway. Endless COVID adaptations, I'm sure you can all relate. Multiple staffing changes and the tragedies in Boulder all added to the challenges and to the grief. It wasn't easy, and at times it was messy and it was not always pretty. It was a lot to manage, and the truth is, you handled it beautifully. Beautifully. You stayed grounded in the teaching of our faith. Compassion and caring were present at most every single gathering. This healthy congregation looked out for each other with compassion. And when mistakes were made, you were self-reflective and honest, and you learned, and you grew, and you lived further into your faith. At every turn, you knew what had to be done, and you did it well. The Odyssey, my friends, is ending with this very ceremony. It feels like we are finally coming home and seeing for the first time with new eyes our place of belonging. The goal of our wonderful search team was to find and attract a new settled minister who would be a terrific fit for our congregation. And they managed to do exactly that, even during a pandemic. Not easy to do. To use a favorite metaphor of Reverend Kelly's, our community is like an aspen grove. You've heard this, right? Just checking. Both our congregation and an aspen grove are deeply connected underground. No one person is the system, yet each person contributes to the system, and when they leave, their contributions live on in the system. Its sum is greater than its parts, and it has a memory. All of this is happening underground, not always in plain sight. You see, ministry is not an ordinary kind of job. When ministers come and go in this system, it is such a big deal because the job of a minister is to keep the system alive and growing by infusing it with all they bring of themselves, their own inspired understanding and perspective of our covenantal values, theology, and ways of being together in this world. They tend to the congregation from their own heart, mind, and soul. So today, we come together at this moment to celebrate the system that we are together, inviting Reverend David to infuse us with his beautiful heart and soul, and with all that he brings from an East Coast, Chicago-esque sort of perspective. He has his own unique way of blessing us, and may we continue to bless him in return, and may this last well into many, many years to come. I light this chalice for this new beginning, for this beautiful light that is bubbling under the earth, and may it rise in brilliance just like this flame.
If we want hope to survive in this world today, every day we got to pray on, pray on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, then every day we got to pray on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, then every day we've got to pray on, pray on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, then every day we've got to pray on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, we've got to every day we've got to walk on, walk on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, then every day we've got to walk on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, then every day we've got to work on, work on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, then every day we've got to work on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, then every day we've got to move on, move on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, then every day we've got to move on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, then every day we've got to march on, march on. If we want hope to survive in this world today, then every day we've got to march on. Teach on this world today, then every day we've got to teach on, teach on. If we want hope to survive this world today, then every day we've got to teach on, teach on. If we want hope to survive this world today, then every day we've got to sing on, sing on. If we want hope to survive this world today, then every day we've got to sing on, 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 sing on. Then every day we've got to sing on.
What a glorious day. What a glorious day to be together. I can't remember the last time I was here in a room full of people. And how beautiful it is to see this room filled again for this occasion, the installation of Reverend David Schwartz. Please join me in a spirit of meditation and prayer. I invite us to begin by just taking some deeper breaths. Breathe in fully. Breathe out fully. Breathe in fully. Breathe out fully. And as you breathe in, imagine your breath bringing in the energy of earth here in this earth room. Feeling the interconnection that lies beneath the surface, but is so very real and present. Take in the sounds of the new. And feel in this moment the profound interconnection that we have together. And how our lives are interwoven in more ways than we can imagine. And how our ministries are interwoven in more ways than we can imagine. This afternoon, clergy are joined from around the country, reminding us of how wide and vast these interconnections are. This afternoon, this congregation joins in covenant with Reverend David Schwartz and with the Spirit of life, with the values that our Unitarian Universalist congregations espouse, with love and justice in our hearts. Spirit of life and love, we know your presence is here with us today. Open our hearts so that we may fully embrace the love that resides in this room and permeates out into the world. God of relationship, creativity, and love, we gather in humble gratitude for this day, for the work and the mystery of the search process that brings people together in their joint ministry, lay and ordained together. May this coming of minister and congregation bring forth in each of us our highest callings. May love and justice guide your ministry together. May your aspirations be grounded in your deeply held values of radical inclusion and freedom from oppression. May what you promise to each other today be your guiding light for many, many years of prosperous ministry. Many blessings on this union be with you for years and years to come. Blessed be. Amen.
Last week, as we watched the news from Ukraine, as we learned that a polar ice sheet had melted into the sea, as we marked 2 years exactly since COVID came to us, 2 years since congregations closed, somebody said to me, I wonder what it would be like to live just for a minute in precedented times. We were walking outside with their new little baby on a beautiful afternoon, and she's like 28 years old, and she said, what are precedented times like? We are so weary and worn, even as we're blinking now in the sunlight of what feels just possibly like a new and more hopeful phase of the pandemic. Here we are in person, and it is so good to be here together with you, but it's strange, right? Our muscles for hope are not strong these days. Our legs and our faith are shaky. But resilience, like trouble, has precedent. You know, in the Middle Ages, when the plague came to Europe, village by village, people believed it was surely the end of the world, and for some, obviously it was. Their own world, the known world, was collapsing, stricken, and they had no way of knowing then that in other places, in fact, most of the planet, the sun was still shining, the sky was still blue. And without knowing that, they still remembered blue sky. They held onto hope without any reason whatsoever to do it. Our circumstance is different now. We know our catastrophes are global. They're all interconnected, from rising fascist states to melting polar ice. But we don't always see or understand in the moment the scope and complexity of resistance movements and resilience, flickers of hope, glimmers of beauty, winds of change blowing invisibly everywhere. We lick our wounds. We count our countless losses. And sometimes we cling to what was. We clutch at the past for no other reason than because it's familiar, it's known to us, it's solid, calcified even, and not misty and inscrutable like the future. But friends, our home, our true and only home, our sanctuary and salvation is in the house of tomorrow. You'll hear these lines a little later from a poet who says, from centuries past, we bring with us words and dreams and harmonies, all in service to a simple idea that we can make a house called tomorrow. Look back only as long as you must, and then go forward into the history you will make. That's our calling now, as we join our hands and turn the page from the before times into what's ahead. That is your calling now as you enter this beautiful new ministry. A few years ago, over a wide swath of months, a longtime member of the congregation I was working with started coming to the church 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times a week. He always had a program idea to discuss, and it was the same one every time because Bob was living then with advancing dementia. And his idea was big and passionate and impossible and insistent. And he always came when I was busy. And we tried to have volunteers sit with him, but he wasn't having it. He'd come into my office and sit down and launch in. And I think he sensed that his project wasn't going to fly. And that made him a bit agitated. At the same time, I was bringing my dog to church a few days a week. Pippin is a rescue dog. We've had her since she was a puppy, but every so often she gets all anxious and sad. She relives all her old worries and her sorrows. Maybe a UPS guy comes to the door, or a thunderstorm threatens to happen somewhere in the continental United States, or some other apocalypse, and she trembles. She doubts her own inherent worth and dignity, her place in the family of things. One day, Bob and Pippin were there at the same time, the three of us, an unholy trinity of unsettled anxiety. Bob with his project, Pippin with her existential dread, me wanting to calm everybody and fix everybody, but mostly frustrated about needing to get back to my all-important busy work. Bob talked, Pippin trembled, and then all of a sudden, she didn't. At some point, she got up, and she sat down right under Bob's dangling, gesturing hand. So as he spoke, he kept brushing her head and rubbing her ears, still talking, but slower, not quite so worked up. She gentled him. He gentled her. They gentled me. They saved me, actually, from the ridiculous illusion of busyness, this seductive delusion of self-importance. I asked Bob about his project, and he told me then about having been a school principal and also an amateur paleontologist, his love of dinosaurs and kids and science, things I'd never known before because I never made the time to ask him. And the more Bob was heard, the more he relaxed, as all of us always do. He wasn't there to push a project. He was there to be heard and seen and known and beheld and held. The thing about dementia is no memory is fixed. The thing about dogs is they only learn by doing a thing 1,000,000 times over. So Pippin and Bob came back many times, which was good because they were teaching me how to do my job, which is not about fixing everything and managing everything or actually doing anything at all, except making space, clearing safe and holy space within me first, and then wider, where somebody else's soul can show up and shine the way it's meant to. Bob was over 80 then, Pippin wasn't young. Those old dogs taught me that what matters, the only thing, is hospitality and grace. This is David's calling, and it's also yours. And at this moment in your history, as a congregation, at this moment in our human history, I cannot think what matters more. We default so often to old behaviors, old narratives, but how are we going to furnish the house of tomorrow? I think of our UU story, how we always tell it to new members, as the history of pragmatic common sense, a tradition of nonstop busy activity and reasonable religion, which is an oxymoron, a contradiction waiting to implode or otherwise prove impotent right when we need grace and mercy the most. What purpose can our religion serve if it has to pass the test of reason and efficacy every time you need to mourn, for example? I mean, cry and cry your heart out, convulsed with grief, as when somebody whom you love has died. There's no room for rational religion there. Even months later, years later, when people shake their heads and say, you should be over that by now. The stages of grief say blah, 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 blah. But you're still brokenhearted, and it's love that's seeping out of the seams of you. What purpose could religion serve if it has to pass the test of reason every time you need to praise the day or laugh out loud, delight in music, children, spring? The daily news weighs on you like lead, and still the sun came up today, and you're grateful, right? You're enchanted. And that just makes no sense at all under the weight of our shared circumstance. But there's no room for logic here. Even in the midst of struggle, neglect of joy is blasphemy. What purpose could liberal religion really serve if it has to pass the test of reason every time you need to muster righteous rage, speak terrible truth to terrifying principalities and powers, bring your unchecked fury to the street, to the Capitol, without pausing to analyze it and what good will it do, and is this seemly, is this appropriate, this uprising, this revolutionary love? Sometimes there is no time for that, and to wait would be a sin. What purpose can our religion serve if it has to pass these tests every time you need to love someone who maybe doesn't seem to deserve it? Maybe proof can't prove that they deserve it, but you are called to love them anyway. There's no space in the universalist equation for the sterile exactitude of Enlightenment thought, benumbing us since the 18th century. Sometimes, all the time, we're called to love humans at their most unlovable, starting in the mirror with ourselves. It seems to me our tradition has just this to say: you are dignified and worthy, everybody is, so act like it. Build your lives around that possibility. The light that shines within you, it's primordial light, radiant and holy. So live your life, sing your songs, grieve your unspeakable sorrows, shout your gratitude unceasing, speak your truth and tremble as if any moment you could die, as if at some point you will die. Bless this world and love it fiercely, as if you have nothing to lose. What would be the point of a religion that did not allow us, compel us, to imagine transformation, to re-examine every myth we live within, every fairy tale, every lie, everything that seems immutable because we've lived with it so long? What can you bring yourself to hope for? And here's where logic leaves us, and maybe we're at last converted to a saving faith, a religion that likes reason very much, but loves imagination more, and sacrifice and service to a larger love transcending understanding. What could a congregation be now? I had a glimpse once in a really unlikely place. My brother lived with us in Minnesota for a few months before he died, and he spent a lot of time at the VA hospital in Minneapolis, where they took beautiful care of him. But more precisely, he spent a lot of time in the smoking shed at the VA, which was a kind of enclosed porch where he could go when he felt well enough. And it was winter, and the smoking shed was freezing, with its concrete floor and its plastic benches and a few space heaters sputtering gas in the corners. And it was thick in there, a greasy haze with ashtrays all around. So I took Mark there many times. We couldn't always sit together because the smoking shed was always packed. And every time, a person sitting next to me, sometimes both of them, would see me there not smoking, red-eyed, wheezing, and they'd say very quietly, so they wouldn't embarrass me, "Need a light?" Or even they'd say, "Here, take this," and offer me their half-smoked cigarette. In that space, this was complicated. I couldn't just say, "No thanks, I don't smoke," because I didn't want to sound judgmental or holier than thou, healthier than thou. "No thanks, I don't smoke, I never have, and I'm not sick, therefore, and I don't belong here, and I'm not part of it," right? So I had to find a way, like I always do, to let thank you be the loudest thing. Sometimes somebody would see me sitting there and thinking I was alone. They'd get up, hospital gown flapping under coat, blanket, in those colored socks with the little white grippers catching on the rough cement, whole IV pole clattering around. They'd come all the way over and give me a cigarette. Cigarettes are expensive, and walking is expensive if you can't afford to waste your energy, if you're really sick or really old or really cold in the horrible smoking shed. I saw this all the time in there. Strangers caring for each other in a somewhat ironic way, but not really. These were gifts of love, bodies and lives broken open in a holy communion of human beings just trying to get by, just trying to get well, just hoping to go home. The thing about Holy Communion in the early Christian church, before it was even called that because it was still a weedy offshoot of Judaism, the thing about Holy Communion then and now is that the table is a welcome table. As in, I'm going to sit at the welcome table. It is not a dinner party. This is not a song of privilege. This is a slave song about who gets to be a person, dating back to when singing like that was illegal for some people. The sacrament can only be open to everybody, or else the communion table becomes a sort of restaurant, only open to those who paid at the door, or whose credit is good, or who made a reservation. Let all who are hungry, come and eat, says the Passover text. And that's everybody. What could a congregation be now? I want the people who come through the doors of our churches to be welcomed as I was in the smoking shed. I want them just like that, a space filled with fear of dying and hope for healing, just like church on any Sunday morning. I've been sorting books recently, a task that feels like entering a time machine. And one that didn't make the cut is an old one from the 1990s. It's all marked up with really brilliant notes that I thought once were so important. And I didn't keep the book, but I love the title. We've had 100 years of psychotherapy, and the world is getting worse. And this is how it feels so often when I think about our work in the world for human rights and liberation, environmental justice, peace. We've had 100 years, 1,000 years of marching and active resistance, 4 centuries to abolish slavery, and 150 years since the Civil War to build up some kind of herd immunity to the aftershocks of slavery, the racism that's still poisoning our blood. We've had 100 years and more to reverse our devastating impact on the planet, to change the ways we ravage species and water and sacred land and each other. A congregation I served out east had its roots in the Underground Railroad. And in the minutes from meetings held in the 19th century there, in an old leather book, handwritten, there were notes about a member there, a free, black, trans woman named Mr. Roberts, who poured coffee in the parlor every Sunday with the Ladies' Guild, wearing a burgundy gown. She was beloved there. The notes show it, week after week. 100 years ago, she was beloved. And now here we are with one state saying you can't say gay, another terrorizing trans kids and their parents, and you wonder, is it getting worse? Is it getting better? You work so hard to change the world, fix every broken thing through legislation, agitation, and still the world's on fire, people dying, children crying, everywhere you look. The danger for Unitarian Universalists, the danger for us, mortal danger, like a mortal sin, is the belief that we can, in our lifetime, hard work the trouble away, or reason the trouble away. The danger, when you give your whole heart, every drop of hope and sweat, and expect the world to change as a direct result, the danger is disappointment, which can make you bitter over time, make a spirit weary, turn idealism into cynicism before you're even old, make you feel you failed. There's danger not just of discouragement, but of losing faith, our soul force. When we've worked so hard and then don't win peace in our lifetime, don't triumph over climate change, can't conquer racism, classism, misogyny, we run the risk of a spiritual crisis, and it can start to look like apathy. It actually starts to look like despair. But listen to this language. Win, triumph, conquer. This is the language of conquest and empire. It's the mindset of patriarchy and white supremacy and capitalism. And those are old narratives for us, and no wonder we're sometimes tired if those are our terms, because conquering a thing is not ever the right thing and rarely even possible. Jesus said, the poor you'll always have with you. And he didn't mean, so don't worry about them, you might as well get rich. He meant, I think he meant, greed and fear run deep in humans, so hard to root out. And thus inequity and war and oppression and poverty run rampant. So be about the work of hospitality, radical grace, and know that good will come. Laws will change. The arc will bend a little toward justice, but not all at once and not in your lifetime. This is not a contract situation where you get to say, yeah, I'll work for change, but only if I see tangible signs of measurable progress. This is not how it goes. He meant, I think, as others since Jesus have meant, give your life away. Give it all away. Love with heart, mind, soul, and strength, and let go of your need for perfection. It is hubris to believe we can fix everything, control anything. Love anyway. Shine anyway. Some things will shift. Lives and souls will be saved, maybe starting with yours. Unclench your angsty little fist. And I'm talking to myself here now. Put one hand into the hands of all the people who've lived their life for love. We're the evidence of that, right? And place the other in the hands of those who will come next, because they are coming, ready or not. And they need something to hang on to. And that something is your own inexhaustible conviction. In the streets this year and last year, and who knows when these years began, after George Floyd, after Dante Wright, after Amir Locke was killed this winter by police, all of them by police, in the streets there's been a chant, and maybe it's chanted here also. In huge crowds, sometimes there comes this moment of stillness. It's uncanny. People breathing as one into their confusion, their anger, their grief. And then a voice somewhere in the crowd begins, ancestors watching. I know they're watching. Ancestors watching. I know. And it goes on, building really loud, then dropping to a whisper, hundreds of strangers reminding each other that they are not alone. They're companioned by a mighty cloud of witnesses, ancestors watching, precedented care. It's an incantation for protection, but it's also a summons. If you felt your ancestors were watching you now, your mother, your grandma, someone passed on whom you really respected, how would you be behaving? If you knew your children were watching, or someone else's kids watching you become an ancestor in training, how would you behave? As one world leader said not long ago, don't put my portrait on your walls, no portraits. Put pictures of your children there instead, and before making any decision, look them in the eyes. That was Volodymyr Zelensky at his inauguration in 2019 in Ukraine. Look your children in the eyes. We make our choices, do our work, pray and march and sing. We get up in the morning and act decently with kindness and hope, not because results are guaranteed, but because our elders and our kids are watching. We look them in the eyes, our own, other people's, people we've not yet met. We mean to be the kind of ancestors they could years from now remember, even if they don't know our names, when their own hope flags, which it will, when their own skies darken under clouds of war, when the evidence for fear outweighs the evidence for joy. We insist on joy. We insist on grace and mercy, though we've considered all the facts. That's the story of our faith. In a moment, we'll bear witness as you make a covenant, minister, and congregation. It is no private contract, but a sign to all the world of your calling as a people, your covenant with hope and history. The Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder exists, as it has from its founding, to proclaim the good news, to bind up the broken, to release from despair every prisoner of injustice and hatred, every person held captive by shame or self-doubt. You're known for this. You've always been. And you're blessed beyond measure that David Schwartz has said yes and will travel with you. And David's blessed as well, and he knows it. The irony always in services like this, the irony and all thisness of this, is that anybody can do the work that ministers are called to do. That is the crux of our polity, the priesthood and prophethood of everybody. David says, you do it all week long. You're out there trying to order daily lives around something larger than yourselves, and once a week you come to church to remember and remind each other what that large thing is. It's a profound commitment to generosity of spirit. It is a brave and humble faith that the broken world is also beautiful and every life worth every struggle. It is kindness. It is God. It is wonder, childlike, wild, and wise, from which all religion springs. Your calling is to hold all this, to speak it all out loud, even when your voice is choked with tears or tiredness, even when you think you've got nothing to say. Your calling, and David's as your minister, is to speak the truth and speak of hope all at once, all the time. A little later, we'll sing the words of Visai Barnwell. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we actually are. We're our grandmother's prayers, we're our grandfather's dreamings, mothers of courage, fathers of time, children of dust, and also great vision. We breathe the breath of our ancestors, and our home is the house of tomorrow. Amen.
Look back as long as you must. Look forward to the history you will make in the house called tomorrow. That is what the Unitarian Universalist Association did in 1988 when it established the Living Tradition Fund. This is a fund that supports our religious professionals, clergy, and religious educators in times of great need. This is looking back to our forebears, to a future that we make, to seminarians who are taking on crushing six-figure debt that they may have a modest paying job to live their faith into the future. It is looking back at our seasoned colleagues who are in retirement, some in poverty, that we may provide them with utility bills during a tight month or hearing aids. It is looking at our current ministers and providing debt assistance as they move into the fullness of their vocations and serve our tradition with deep and abiding faith. Of my dear colleagues here, may I ask, who has received support from the Living Tradition Fund? This support really matters. It matters monetarily, but I will also say it means so much to be in need and to know that the people who make the church universal in our denomination cared enough to think about the house of tomorrow, to furnish it that we might live. On a day like today, I think of those who came before us. I think of those who will come after us, and that we may aspire to be ancestors in the training. And on this occasion of the mentors who we have been so lucky to have, Reverend David and I think of my internship supervisor, Rob Eller-Isaacs. Some of you may know him, some of you may know of him. A patriarch of sorts in our denomination, a pillar among our clergy. And many of you may know he was recently diagnosed with a terminal illness. Rob was often asked to do this ask at ordinations and installations for the Living Tradition Fund because he was not afraid of asking for money. And so I learned and I watched and I slowly etched away my little fears around this. And so I am going to ask you for the money the way Rob asks for money because he can no longer do this and it is now my job. It's not awkward to talk about money, really. It's totally awkward. It's our weird societal construct of how we measure time and energy and often, unfortunately, worth and respect. But it's also how we build our house for tomorrow. And so I want you to think of a number. A number, a gift that you think is meaningful, is generous, that you'll be proud of. And I want you to think of that number and think of the hearing aids or glasses you're providing for one of our colleagues in retirement. I want you to think of that assistance check to someone who has a tremendous debt and hasn't yet found one of the few parish jobs that exist. I want you to think about our working clergy who've had a family emergency. You've got that number, everybody? Double it. I did that myself. I was first thinking, well, what's appropriate? Okay, $100. And I heard Rob in my head. Double it. So today, in honor of our privilege to be part of the UUCB community, in honor of Rob and all of those mentors and ministers and ancestors who have come before us and those yet to come, David and I will contribute $500. I ask you to think of the amount that you'll be proud of, and that you give as generously as you are able, and that your clergy and our faith tradition be worthy of this gift, and that together we may build a house of tomorrow. The ancestors are watching.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, the far-off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars? I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close? Songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost home. As to that rock I'm clinging, since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? Tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing. When friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. And friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
On behalf of the Ministerial Search Committee, we have looked forward to this day with great anticipation. Our choosing of a minister, our exercising the right to choose, is a precious part of our liberal religious heritage. We proceed now with solemnity and joy in this act of mutual dedication to the relationship of minister and congregation.
This ritual of installation is a covenant that rises out of the congregation. It is a promise that we all make together. It cannot be imposed, but only co-created. With that intention, I invite those gathered to rise in body or spirit and speak together our words of installation to Reverend David. We would have you live among us, be with us in our grief and our uncertainty, rejoice with us during times of joy and grace, preach from your heart to hearts, for yours is the free pulpit. Listen to us, represent our faith here and beyond here. Care for us as you care for yourself. Strive for balance as minister, spouse, and parent. Be at one with yourself as well as with us. We pledge to walk with you in unity and peace. We, the congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder, do hereby install you to serve as our minister, and we welcome you among us.
With humility and joy, and mindful of these great obligations, I freely and enthusiastically take up this ministry. Grateful for the generations which have brought each of us and all of us to this moment, I pledge myself to the work of co-creation and cooperation, of companionship and compassion. Thank you. Let's sing together, friends.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises, sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the spirit. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time, daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises, sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises, sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises, sings to the universe who we are.
Greetings. Yesterday at this time, I was doing a similar thing at the First Unitarian Universalist Church in Austin, Texas. The numerous congregations in the Austin area and the entire southern region send their greetings to their UU cousins and celebrate with you. Now, that was for an ordination, not an installation. And it makes much more sense to me to have a charge to the minister at an ordination. They haven't really experienced the full weight of the ministerial thing. Whereas David has been a minister for multiple congregations and is good at many things. Not only does he beat me regularly at board games, he is an excellent teacher and preacher. He writes well. He's good at dog training. Builds Lego like nobody's business. Does a fine internship supervision, parenting, spelunking in the catacombs underneath First Unitarian Society in Chicago, participating in the dismantling of white supremacy culture in all its fascinating and harmful manifestations. He's already good at all that. What am I going to tell him? Self-care. Now, this might be true for other of us in the room, too. Is there anyone else who sometimes struggles with self-care? At least a few of us. In this racist, capitalist, heteropatriarchy of a society we have. So the elements of my charge to David will probably apply to others. If you think they do, please internalize them and build on them in your own lives. I wish it for all of us, myself included. Care for yourself in body, mind, and spirit. Hydrate. I don't know how you do it up here in this atmosphere. Drink more water. See, there you go. Thank you, Terry. Exercise regularly. It's a drag, but it's so good for us. Find someone to walk with, perhaps. Find a good therapist. Deepen your spiritual practice, which I am told, particularly for ministers, our practice is resuming our practice. Please resume your practice. Make time with loved ones outside the congregation. Terry J. and Matthew are lovely human beings and nurturing. Y'all are too. That is a good time as well. You need time with people that you love. And you need time alone as it serves you. Now, this one's going to be a hard one for all of us. We're going to practice together. No. Say it with me. No. It's so hard when someone comes to you and needs something or wants something, and you know in that vast toolkit of yours that you probably can help, or maybe could help, or at least should help. And sometimes the right thing to do is say, I cannot at this time. No. See, I missed the cue. That would have been better. Thank you. Say no sometimes. And if someone tells you no, take it in good spirits. It's not a comment on your worth as a human being. Reach out for support before you need it. Seek out joy. We've heard about creating this welcoming space, and Victoria reminds us you have to create that in yourself first before you can offer it to the congregation. A wise woman once told me, we are required to share our light, but not our oil. Do not share your oil. Take care of yourself, David. You are a good gift to this world. And the better you can take care of yourself, the longer and deeper your gifts to the rest will be. May it be so.
Greetings. So I bring you greetings, temporary assignment that I have at White Bear UU Church, where David did his internship and where Victoria was a longtime lead minister. Bring you greetings from that congregation and congratulations. Reverend Kelly put it so well this morning in the service when she said about your getting Reverend David to come here. You got lucky, right? Yeah, you really did. And knowing the love that people have for David at White Bear, being able to see his work and Terry's work at First Unitarian Society of Chicago as their clergy coach. Wow, well done, well done. And as David quickly said after Kelly said that, he feels lucky too. And that's true. So there's a little more than luck involved in all this, right? So you've worked hard, you've gone through challenges to get to this point. You all did such an amazing job during the developmental ministry. Really, really hard work. Work that a lot of us from afar didn't think you'd be able to do, I'll be honest. It's amazing. And then you had such a strong, settled ministry with Reverend Kelly. And then you had a productive interim period, even though everything was arrayed against it, that be happening. And then you had a successful search for a lead minister. You are ready for this next bright chapter of Boulder UU Church. So sometimes charges to the congregation are about challenging a congregation to get its act together and quit making the same mistakes, and you've probably had those before. But this one, thankfully, is really a wellness check. It's a reminder to keep being attentive to the well-being of the congregation. A new settled ministry is always different from the previous ministries, but given all the changes in our world over these past couple of years, wow, it is going to be different. So much is different. There's a camera there. This service and every service from now on is going to be virtual and in person. And the pandemic has left many people with less capacity for heavy involvement in church life. Congregations need to be able to make space for that. Know that you just practiced, for you all to be able to say a sacred no to opportunities to serve the congregation and its mission, and yes, also to say a sacred yes, I hope at times. And all this means that you may have to move a little more slowly than you're accustomed to moving. And that's okay, it's a new reality. Over the past few years, you have learned again what is universally true, which is ministers come and go. And I say this as someone who served a congregation for 25 years. Looking back, I was a transitional minister. From day one, the biggest thing unknown about my departure would be when. So it is the congregation that persists. It is not the minister. Even as you change, it is the congregation that persists. Your congregation's vision and mission and work within and beyond these walls ultimately belongs to all of you, not to Reverend David. David will one day, I hope a long time from now, leave. This place is yours, not his. And it's not just yours, though. It's also those who are going to find you and walk through those doors, come through those doors and find their lives changed by you. Always be mindful of them. Keep making space for them. Keep welcoming them to join you as full partners in the sacred work of building a spiritual community. And a final wellness reminder is to treat your minister, your new lead minister, well and fairly. Compensation is a tangible symbol of that. So is giving him space to nourish and tend his soul and body. You can't do all the stuff that Chip just charged David to do, but you can allow him to do that work. You can encourage him to do that work, to tend to his mind, body, and soul, and to his relationship with Terry and their kids, and the 4 small animals and 1 really large animal that lives in their house. And of course, don't just treat your lead minister well and fairly, but all your staff. All your staff. So I offer my deepest congrats to David, to all of you on this really wonderful occasion. And now I say, go, congregation, go. It's going to be beautiful.
Friends, it is with deep gratitude that I'm here today. It is with excitement and hope and profound curiosity for what the road ahead is going to bring. I'm so excited to discover where we're going together and to make that path by walking it. Share these words for a benediction by the poet Alberto Rios called A House for Tomorrow.
From this house to the world we will go, hand in hand. From this house to the world we will go, hand in hand. From this house to the world we will go, hand in hand. From this house
A House Called Tomorrow by Alberto Rios.
we will go, hand in hand.
You are not 15 or 12 or 17. You are 100 wild centuries and 15. Bringing with you in every breath and every step everyone who has come before you. All the yous that you have ever been. The mothers of your mother, the fathers of your father. And if someone in your family tree was trouble, 100 were not. The bad do not win, not finally. No matter how loud they are, we simply would not be here if that were so. You are made fundamentally from the good. With this knowledge, you never march alone. You are the breaking news of the century. You are the good who has come forward through it all, even if so many days feel otherwise. But think, when you as a child learned to speak, it's not that you didn't know words. It's that from the centuries you knew so many, and it's hard to choose the words that will be your own. And from these centuries, we humans bring with us the simple solutions and songs, the river bridges, and star charts and song harmonies, all in service to a simple idea that we can make a house called tomorrow. What we bring finally into the new day, every day, is ourselves. And that's all we need to start. That's everything we require to keep going. You look back only for as long as you must, then go forward into the history you will make. Be good, then better. Write books, cure disease, make us proud, make yourself proud. And those who came before you, when you hear thunder, hear it as their applause. From this house